Section 2.2, Video 3. In this video, we will continue with the objectives: represent simple statements and negations symbolically, represent compound statements symbolically, and also express symbolic statements in English. Let's begin with compound statements with grouping symbols. Grouping symbols, such as parentheses or brackets, are used to signify which portion of the problem should be completed first. Using the statements P, it is Tuesday, and Q, I go jogging, we're going to write P and Q as a sentence. It is Tuesday. And is the middle connective. Q, I go jogging. In the second one, notice that there's a negation with parentheses. The negation outside the parentheses indicates that everything in the parentheses is negated. To write that in English, we would write it as using the phrase, "It is not true that." And then that phrase would indicate the negation. After that, we would continue with everything that is in the parentheses. In this case, it is Tuesday, and I go jogging. The phrase, "it is not true that," is that negation in front of the parentheses. Example 11. Given statements P, Q, and R, write the sentences using words. In Part A, different than Part B, Part A, the negation symbol is attached to statement P only. In Part B, the negation symbol is attached to the grouping symbols, meaning that everything inside the grouping symbols will be negated. Let's go back to Part A. We need to write the statement negation P, meaning it is not Friday. Using and. Statement Q, I cook breakfast. Now Part B, we talked about using that phrase that indicates that you're going to negate more than one statement with grouping symbols. So the phrase is, "It is not true that." And then after that, we continue with everything that's in the parentheses. It is Friday. And I cook breakfast. Part C. Here we have parentheses on the right-hand side towards the end of our compound statement. And in this case, we're going to use a comma to help indicate that P is by itself. And then after the and, we have two statements that are connected together with parentheses. So let's start with statement P that's by itself. It is Friday. Then I'm going to use a comma with that word and I'm going to show that the negation R, arrow Q, the conditional, is all after that comma. To use the conditional, we're going to want the if, then. So if, then. After the if, we have statement negation R, which would mean it is morning. So if it is morning, then statement Q, I cook breakfast. Again, that comma is helping you know that it is Friday is on its own, and then after the comma, everything else is in our parentheses. So here's our statement P, and that comma is helping us say that it is morning then I cook breakfast goes together after the comma. Let's go the other direction. If we're given the words, let's write the symbolic notation. Example 12. We see that phrase, part A, it is not true that. That's our negation symbol, and we're going to use parentheses to write everything after it is not true that in our parentheses. I took a scuba class would be P, and I cannot swim would be negation Q. So it is not true that would be our negation outside of our grouping symbols, and then inside the grouping symbols would be P and negation Q. Part B, it is Monday would be statement R. We have a comma indicating that it is Mondays by itself, and after that comma we have two pieces. It is raining would be negation S, or I can swim would be statement Q. So again, the comma is showing what's after the comma is going to be connected together. Part C, if I cannot swim, so let's start with our arrow. And in front of the arrow, the antecedent is I cannot swim, which would be statement negation Q. Then, after the arrow, our consequent is two parts. I did not take a scuba class, or it is not raining. We want to connect to those in a grouping symbol. I did not take a scuba class would be negation P, or it is not raining is statement S. Let's discuss the dominance of connectives. Without parentheses, the dominance of logic connectives should be used to highlight the main connective of the statement. The dominance goes in order from most dominant to least dominant. Most dominant is a biconditional, and symbolic notation we would use a double-sided arrow. Next dominant would be a conditional. Going in order after a biconditional and conditional would be conjunction and disjunction at the same level of dominance. And then finally the negation. Example 13. Given these compound statements, we're going to determine what is the most dominant connective, and then rewrite the statement using parentheses before and after that dominant operation so that we can highlight that main dominant connective. In statement A, I don't see a biconditional, which is most dominant. The next one I'm going to look for is a conditional, and I see that. So I'm going to mark that as the most dominant for part A. And then we would use parentheses before that dominant connective, and if needed, parentheses after. In this case, the parentheses after are not necessary because it's only one statement by itself. On the left, we would have P or negation R in grouping symbols. Our dominant operation is our conditional, and then statement Q. And now we've used parentheses or grouping symbols to highlight that dominant connective. Part B. We have both a biconditional and a conditional, but in this case, the biconditional is most dominant for part B. And again, we can use parentheses before and after. R by itself would not need parentheses, they aren't necessary. And then we have the biconditional, and we would need the parentheses after to connect the Q arrow negation P together. And so now our parentheses and our grouping symbols have highlighted that main connective of the biconditional double arrow. Part C. In this case, we again have both a conditional and a biconditional, but our biconditional is what's going to be most dominant. Okay. So let's use grouping symbols both before and after. I'm going to use brackets to highlight, or you could have used parentheses to highlight everything on the left of the biconditional, and then we wouldn't need parentheses on the right or brackets on the right because it's a single statement. Now, we could go a little bit further with part C, and we could also identify the next most dominant, because here within our brackets, we also have two operations, a conditional, and we also have a conjunction. This one would be next most dominant. So it's dominant within our brackets. So we could use parentheses before and after to highlight that conditional within our brackets. In that case, we would have statement T, our conditional, the negation P and T together in parentheses, and then our biconditional with negation Q. Notice that the biconditional is most dominant. We did that first. And then within the brackets, we also saw that the conditional would be more dominant than the conjunction. And that ends example 13.